You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to a very interesting episode of Ask Drone U. I think this is going to actually be very, very thought-provoking. As many of you know, the Mavic 3 is out, but the reaction is, well, not matching up to historical precedents, which is kind of the focus of today's show. As always, my name is Paul.
My name is Rob. Super glad to be with you today. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you also for anyone who has recently put in a review wherever you listen to the show. We do really appreciate it. Just grateful for everyone out there and grateful for the community. I'm really enjoying the new community app. If you are a Drone U member, you've got to get in there. It's amazing. So it's really refreshing too, just to see that positivity back and to see people helping each other out. It's nice to have that.
It's awesome. Digging it. Yeah. We got to get everybody in there though. We're still got some tricklers in terms of members, but change is hard.
It is.
That's one thing about Facebook is that it's easy. Right?
Well, yeah, it's also easy to screw you. So on that bombshell, that said, I don't even know how to touch that with Facebook because they even just changed their name to Meta.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, it's an app I think all of you would enjoy. That said, we're going to get right into today's question, which is brought to you by the Drone U in-person trainings are back. They are up on the site. And if you want to join us for one, highly recommend that you do that because you're going to learn how to avoid emergencies. You're going to learn how to fly in close proximity. And you are going to learn what, really can't be taught over the internet, which is building your confidence. We've got a training here in November coming up really soon. Actually, really grateful of how fast that training filled up. We've got trainings coming up at the end of the year and in the beginning of next year. If you would like to join us, go to thedroneu.com. Check it out for flight mastery and mapping. Personally, I'm really excited for these classes to get back out in the field, have some fun. Kevin will be joining me for this November training, and so grateful for him as well. And you can ask him how he scored Amazon as a client and continues to do so.
It's killing it.
Yeah, he really is. In fact, brings up a post I saw in the community this morning, Rob, which was all about how this guy was literally too busy to handle any more work.
No kidding.
Yeah, it showcases the importance of scale.
Yeah, wow, he needs that class.
Yeah. So again, if you guys are interested in our scaling business systems course, this course is a practical, this isn't like theory or information. It's more so practical setting up autonomous systems in your business to be able to handle those extra clients. And we even have a deal coming up in Black Friday for that. So make sure you check it out. It's something you're not going to want to miss. But I think we're ready for that question. I'm chomping at the bit on this one, Rob, because I got to say DJI has really turned the tables per se.
Well, let's listen.
Hey, Paul and Rob, Tom again. Hey, now that the M3 has been released and we've seen the confirmed specs on it, and now we're seeing reviews out there, I found myself pretty underwhelmed with what was put out. With the lack of the mechanical shutter, also having to fly from the Fly app, it just seems like DJI is dumbing down the drones themselves, not really allowing the full potential of them to be unlocked. What do you think is going on with this? Is DJI moving away from the more technical side on the consumer drones? Do you think they're going to drop something on the enterprise level that has different sensors, different payloads, things like that? Just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Love to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you always taking the time that you do to send questions in, always very thoughtful questions as well. And by the way, Tom asked his question at askdroneu.com. We want to hear from you. We know you have questions. We know you have things on your mind, and we'd love to do our part to help you get those answered. So Mavic 3, I know there was a lot of, call it a lot of hope. Mm-hmm. Maybe some enthusiasm about, some of the leaked photos made it appear that it was going to be like the drone to end all drones, right?
Like a platform almost, yeah.
Yeah, and apparently that's not the case, at least not here in the States.
No, it sure isn't. And in fact, a couple of quick data points before we go into what this Mavic 3 does offer and why a lot of people are metaphorically shaking their head. Because I think a lot of people were set up for excitement and have come to realize that maybe it wasn't all it's been cracked up to be. So before we go into the actual specs of what it does offer, some of the bombshells that have come out since the drone has come out, especially the drone deploy bombshell. First and foremost, a couple data points. One, we ran a poll on Instagram. The Mavic 3 is out. Are you getting one? And surprisingly, 78% of the about 800 people who were polled said no. And I thought that was really interesting. And Rob, I don't know if that's because of the $5,000 price point. I don't know if it's because of the fact that you, like Tom alluded to, you fly this drone on the DJI Fly app, which does not showcase battery voltage, no attitude mode. A lot of the settings are dumbed down. You don't have nearly as much control. And we've seen this historical progression over the last 5 to 6 years anyway, as far as drones being dumbed down and dumbed down and dumbed down and dumbed down to make them more widely accessible to the greater general population. But this drone, the Mavic 3, there's two versions. There's the regular Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 Cine. The Cine version is essentially like the Pro. It does shoot 4K 120. It does have a micro four thirds sensor, still just 20 megapixels though, even though it is a larger sensor. And it also has a telephoto lens, or camera as well. So it's a dual camera. Pretty impressive too, the zoom on that little camera. But that said, the $5,000 price point has a lot of people shaking their head. In fact, one particular person in the community, Rob, was saying that, with the Mavic 3 costing this much, that they would probably hold out for the Sony AirPeak.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. I think what DJI did, assuming the AirPeak ever actually comes out, is do Sony a big favor.
Yeah,
right?
literally.
Because that is probably, given the way this turned out, going to increase that pent-up demand for something like the Sony.
Especially when Sony's trying to build an ecosystem, right? They're coming out with their own CareFresh program. They're coming out with their own mapping software. We've seen a lot of leaks where this drone has a lot of the third-party application stuff that we're used to with DJI built into the controller, like a lot of the high-level enterprise drones, like the Watts Innovations Prism, stuff like that. So I think that you're 100% right. DJI might actually be shooting itself in the foot when people like Sony are saying, well, we're going to give you all of this. We're going to give you this platform so you can use this drone for all of these things. And, the only thing is that AirPeak is not available.
Well, and the other thing about that is we've had some of those same conversations just recently about this particular Mavic 3 drone. My point is it didn't turn out the way that we hoped and thought it would, right? So that very same thing could happen with Sony's drone. There's a whole lot of hyperbole and assumption going into that thing based on some news, but we don't know.
Well, that's a very good point, because even with the leaks that we saw with the Mavic 3, in the spec releases, it said that there was a mechanical shutter. And now with these new specs that we're seeing on the Mavic 3, it says no mechanical shutter, which is really interesting. And on top of that, there is no SDK for the Mavic 3. And this was kind of a bombshell that Drone Deploy dropped in an email this weekend saying, hey, we know a lot of our customers have been asking questions about the Mavic 3. A lot of people are eager and ready to upgrade. But unfortunately, without an SDK, neither Drone Deploy will not work, nor will any other mapping software. And it really just makes you wonder, with the Mavic 3 coming out, with extreme lack of feature sets, a lack of safety controls, and with people like Sony saying, no, we're going to give you all those things. We're going to give you that platform. It really makes you wonder, has DJI officially shot itself in the foot, or are they playing into the political games of the U.S.? Because if we remember, there have been multiple investigations recently that have been spurred, FCC, FTC, etc. And one of those investigations was all about the pricing strategy from DJI, and that they're priced so low that no one else can compete. So DJI comes out and says, okay, well, if you want it to be more expensive and have less stuff, here you go.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. But it also makes you wonder how DJI was able to come up with all these chips when Autel just announced that all their new drones, the Nano and the Evo Lite, are not going to be available until January at the earliest of next year.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really makes you wonder too if it's kind of if the Mavic 3 wasn't fully ready to go out and they wanted to get it out for the holiday season anyway, they want to get on people's holiday shopping lists. The drone's not fully ready, and they say, well, how can we get it out there so it can be purchased, and we'll build in these features later? Because the lack of SDK really makes you question the value of this drone. And Rob, we wrote an article about the value of the Mavic 3 and kind of comparing it not only to other Mavics, but also comparing it to, well, okay, if it does mapping, then it's actually a Phantom 4 Pro. And okay, it has dual cameras, so it's essentially, something like an Inspire where you can have, different lens options to get different focal lengths and different views. But without an SDK, you can't use things like Litchi. And so part of that value proposition was, oh, this is a great drone for inspections. Okay, well, how do you scale inspections if there's no SDK, so you can't fly, let's say, a construction site, save that flight plan and rerun it over and over and over again and have that scalability? I mean, I honestly need to go back and update that article and say, frankly, we were wrong and the value is not there, at least as of right now, because it's no longer a $5,000 proposition compared to, say, $12K. Now it's $5,000 proposition compared to $1,800. And frankly, it just doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense, to be 100% honest with you.
Yeah, no, that's not surprising at all. One question that I do have for you is with regard to the flight times, because apparently the flight times on this drone are pretty substantially better. I had read something that was saying 45 minutes.
45-minute flight time.
So obviously that's in perfect conditions. We all know that. Moving past that, but let's just assume 45 minutes. How much does that really matter? If you don't have the SDK to do some of the things that you would want to do to utilize that much flight time. So for example, I'm talking about somebody, let's just say, doing some videography or something. You don't really need to be in the air that long, do you?
I think that there are a lot of cases, it goes back and forth, frankly. I think there's a lot of cases where you could use those whole batteries and they could be very useful. I mean, I think of like sporting events. I think of, shooting one-time events or conferences or whatnot where you only have a certain amount of shots in a certain given period of time. I think it could be really useful. But here's the kicker, and kind of to your point, if you can't do these mapping jobs, if you can't do these inspections,
right,
if you can't do these things that are normally multi-battery operations, what does it matter?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, what does it matter?
Exactly. I mean, I guess you could do an entire half of soccer, so that's a good thing.
Woo!
I don't know what else to say. It's pretty interesting, pretty disappointing, I suppose. Although it could change quickly. I mean, who knows? Maybe they do an update soon. Well,
and so a lot of people are saying that in January it's going to have an update and we're going to see a bunch of new features and whatnot.
Right.
And, that kind of goes back to what we said at the beginning, that, well, maybe this drone wasn't ready to come out and they're kind of launching the bare bones, what we call here at Drone U, the MVP, the minimum viable product.
Yeah, and maybe they're doing that now just because of obvious reasons. It's the holiday season that's coming up. So in that sense, it makes sense. And from a business standpoint, I can understand that. And if there are people that don't buy it that would have, if it had a mechanical shutter, for example, well, that's okay. I mean, the people that do buy it will, right? I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify, but gosh, I had another question for you I wanted to ask. It'll come to me, but I'm not remembering what it was at this point.
Looking at that photo, isn't it amazing? They continue to add more degrees of canter to the motors. So they're moving further and further away from plumb to the ground as far as the profile for the motors and props. It's really interesting.
And what do you think the reason for that is?
Increased stability and agility. A lot of people were saying that the drone flies extremely well in high winds. But, another thing that I've seen a lot of, Rob, is, the guy who shall go unnamed because, someone wrote an article saying that a lot of people have really done serious damage to their brand new drones, even on just doing things like landing it. It took a hard landing and the gimbal popped out. And that kind of goes into quality control stuff. I mean, I saw so many YouTube videos on the Action 2 after it came out, which was just a few weeks ago, that the camera was overheating again and again and again and again. And it really just makes you wonder, is DJI rushing this stuff out? Because when you look at the data on Instagram, right? This is something that I always look at. I'm curious on launches. I always look at how many posts there are about the new drone. Typically within a day or two of the launch, there's 20 or 30,000 hashtags, right? When I looked at the Mavic 3 just yesterday, which was a full weekend after it was released, there were only 2,500 posts.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it really seems like the general population is just really not super excited about this aircraft. And I don't know if it's the price point, the features. I'm not really sure what it is. But I will say this, something that hit me this morning, and I kind of wanted to ask you this question. But with more of these drones kind of taking away features that we're used to, especially safety features, it makes you wonder if the drones that we already have are going to increase in value. Because, for example, you can't buy a Mavic 2 Pro right now just about anywhere.
No kidding.
And so it makes you wonder, well, do the older drones then have more value?
Well, I mean, I suppose relative to what they might have otherwise had, sure. But relative to this, probably not. I mean, this is still probably a better drone than the Mavic 2 Pro, right? As much as we love the Mavic 2 Pro. But yeah, relatively speaking, that's probably true. If we were if someone's trying to unload a Mavic 2 Pro, for example, they're probably going to be able to get a little bit more, just like somebody trying to unload, I don't know, my son likes to look at 250 dirt bikes. Those have gone up.
Interesting.
Because it's the same kind of thing. It's hard to get a newer one. But anyways, that's just kind of the world that we live in. Everything used that is still useful and in good shape is worth more. But one of the things Tom asked was, does this make us think that they've sort of dumbed this down? And I don't know how we could use any other term that certainly works, because there's going to be more enterprise level stuff that comes out with this kind of these features that everybody hoped this would have.
Well, and that's totally possible, right? Is that they further segregate the market so that there's an enterprise version of the Mavic 3. It's got dual cameras. Maybe it's got 3 cameras, right? Maybe it's got a thermal and the telephoto and a wide. I could see them doing that because the enterprise drones still have those safety features that we're used to, even the newest ones, right? The Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advance, it still has attitude mode. It still has voltage. All those things are powerful tools, and kind of going back to the overall reaction of the rollout. I reached out to a friend of mine. He's a YouTuber. In fact, I would say that kind of switched places as far as followings have been concerned, because at the beginning, we had a lot more followers than he did, and he's really grown. He's gotten into these, tech reviews. All he does is just drone reviews and whatnot. But I think that his response to a question kind of says it all in regards to not only the quality of information that you sometimes get from YouTube, but like how much real transparency there is. And I asked him, and I'm not going to say his name, by the way, because I'm not here to bash anybody, but I said, so how do you think the reaction has been to the M3? It seems smaller than usual to me, but I'm curious on your thoughts. And his reaction, and I see, I'm quoting this from text message, so I'm showing it to Rob so he knows it's real. But he says, it's super smooth. I'm like, what? He's like, it flies nice. I'm like, are you serious? Like, What is this, Wall Street Bets? Like drone street bets?
Is that quote? A code is what I meant to say.
Like when he sent that, well, the image that I got in my mind was like Talladega Nights, where he's like in his very first interview, he's like, car drives nice. It drives nice. And you're like, okay, cool. Great information. And I think it's just because a lot of those YouTubers who get those drones ahead of time, which that used to be us too, they get the drones and it's hardcore promotion, because they get sales from every drone that's sold. And so it's not in their best interest to maybe say, the reaction hasn't really actually been so good, and Rob, you know me, I always want to be as honest and as upfront as I can with people,
Sure.
sometimes almost to a fault. All right.
Sometimes, maybe.
Yeah, guilty numerous times. So that said, we can all evolve, but also I think in an effort to be honest, it really seems like the reaction from the community is quite negative. And so I even reached out to one of our good friends at Drone Deploy and I said, hey, I got that email. I even wrote an article about it here, blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, people are pissed. A lot of people that he knows were, wanting to buy new drones. They were looking at this Mavic 3.
People have been waiting for this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely disappointing. But in the end, everybody has to say, okay, this is the features that it does have. This is the features that it doesn't have. Is it going to work for me? It's really kind of simple.
Yeah, no, for sure. But it also just makes you think too, is this beneficial to domestic manufacturers, right? Higher price point, less features. Sure, it flies a little bit longer. Woohoo!
I think it definitely is beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Well, how so?
Well, because it's lowering the bar.
And raising the price point.
Right. Yeah. So it's giving them more room to squeeze in, is the way it appears to me, just sort of on the surface.
Yeah, and I looked at the Free Fly Systems Astro, which you can now buy, which is awesome. Congrats, guys. And I was looking at, okay, well, let's get one of these kits and train on it and whatnot. $15,000 though.
Well, and I'm not talking necessarily about that level, but maybe if we get something included in the domestic realm that's closer to this. Of course, I don't know is that ever going to happen?
I really don't know. I'm sure that there are companies that are looking at this saying, thank you, DJI. Like if I were Sony right now, I would be stoked. If I were Autel right now, I would be stoked, except a lot of people are unable to buy Autel drones at the moment because they're delayed. I don't know, man. This has been a very interesting year, to say the least, in the drone industry.
What a way to end it. I guess we're not done yet. We still have a couple months, but...
This is true. This is very true. But my point is that it's been a very interesting year, and this kind of adds to it. Mm-hmm. And I think DJI might have just shot themselves in the foot really, really badly, to the benefit of domestic manufacturers.
Maybe we just don't know everything, because they've done a pretty good job of outsmarting people up to this point. So.
Well, they sure have. And even again, going back to that value article, I mentioned how, we've been seeing a lot of Skydio talking about how they believe that they can make inspections easier and more seamless and blah, blah, blah. And I think in the right environment that could be the case. And I was saying, well, DJI, if they launch this as a normal Mavic, that really would crush Skydio. So if I were Skydio right now and I saw this, I would actually be ecstatic. Because you're just like, what did DJI just launch? Like, really? Like, it's pretty much an Inspire 2X5 on a smaller body with great flight time, but no third-party applications, no advanced flight modes, not intelligent flight modes, advanced flight modes, like full pilot control. Yeah, if I were them, and if I were Sony, if I were Free Fly Systems, if I were Autel, I would be sending DJI a thank you note. Maybe a nice little block of tungsten for Christmas.
To add to their collection, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Anyways, I think we probably beat this thing to death, but...
Well, before we end it, let me ask you a question, because...
me or them?
You.
Oh.
Seeing that you are a comptroller and seeing that we normally have a class on these drones as soon as they come out, which I'm guessing we're still going to do a class on this drone. But when you see this drone, when you think about it, as a purely financial standpoint, and thinking of if you were a drone pilot and you had to amortize this cost and then make it up and use this tool to make money, where do you stand? Do you feel like this drone, are you ready to go out and buy this drone right now? I mean, are you thinking that even in the eyes of Drone U, are you hesitant in buying this drone? And I'm not asking because...
He's putting me on the spot, so it'll be recorded for posterity.
No. And I don't even care.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
I mean,
I don't really think that.
And I'm not trying to sit here and sell you on, okay, go buy the drone. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying from a purely objective standpoint.
Understand.
What do you think? I mean, are you ready to run out and buy this thing?
I'm not. I mean, in terms of preparing to help people learn how to fly it and train people, yes. I mean, I think that's what we do. And so we need to do that. In terms of its usefulness, it's, what's the word? We'll just stick with its usefulness. I'd probably say no because of the mechanical shutter issue.
The SDK.
And the SDK, yeah. I mean, you just, I just don't, for me, and I'm not a videographer, I'm not a cinematographer, very, very clearly not. I don't know why you don't, especially like if you're sitting on an Inspire 2 and a Mavic 2 Pro and you've got a couple of good drones and maybe you've even got a Phantom 4 V2 or whatever mixed in there, why would you buy this?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And to your point, when the Mavic 3 first came out, the number of listings for Phantom 4 Pros was literally off the charts.
We should have bought about 10 of them.
I couldn't agree with you more. Most of those listings are gone.
Yeah, I bet they are. I didn't know about that.
Which I think says a whole lot in itself.
It does. I agree.
Yeah, and I mean, too...
Interesting.
You make a really good point about if you've got an Inspire, there's really no reason to have this. I couldn't agree with you more. One last question. Okay.
Especially if you have an Inspire with the X7.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's like...
Well, and they fixed the mapping issue with that class that I gave in 2018 about the multiple block issue. That has been fixed, so you can use the i2 X7 for mapping. Really cool stuff. That said, last question. We've talked about the Mavic 3. We have, I got a couple questions. If there are less people flying this drone and thus less people to train, does that change your ideology on buying it for the school?
Well, I thought about that when you were asking the question, and I think there's still enough.
Okay.
I think there will still be enough.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, that's my hunch.
I remember the other question. So when we were up filming the wedding videography class with Kara, which will probably be coming at the end of the quarter for you guys, one of the things that she said is, Paul, I really want you to do a new drone guide. And it's something that you've been asking for as well. And she asked for something very, very, very specific. And she was like, I want to know every drone that has a screen on the remote. I don't want to have to use my phone. I need my phone for other stuff. I don't want to have to use my phone. And she's like, even with my Mavic, I can, not have my phone and still see the telemetry and whatnot. I may not be able to frame up a shot, but at least I know what's going on with the drone. And so I showed her the Mini 2, which was like brand new at the time. And she's like, yeah, I would never get this because it doesn't have a screen on the remote. And the Mavic 3, the basic version, has pretty much a Mini 2 remote. No screen, nothing.
Saw that. I was surprised.
And the Mavic 3 Cine has a new Pro controller, not a smart controller. And so your smart controller will not pair to this drone. You can only use it for the drones you already have. And so that makes me wonder too, well, okay, are sales going to be further affected even on the cheaper edition if they're like, well, why am I getting a Mini 2 remote on a $2,000 drone? Do you think that will impact sales as well?
Well, it's interesting because that kind of goes back to Tom's question about dumbing things down. I don't know. I guess if I had to answer the question, will it affect sales? A little bit, not a lot.
Yeah, and that would be some great data to measure.
Yeah.
I would actually love to do a great unstructured data set on this for a sentiment analysis. This would be a perfect
That's
perfect
true.
data problem.
Yeah,
So,
it'd be fun. It'd be fun.
Because, go ahead.
Useful? I don't know.
I think useful because I think a sentiment analysis would showcase right away, are people positive towards this drone, thus they're going to buy it, or are they negative towards this drone, thus sales could be extremely reduced?
You know what my guess is? 50-50.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd rather spend our data models on things for the company, not for this. But
Right. Well, I mean, if we needed to know this to determine whether or not we are going to do a class, that'd be one thing. But I think there's enough activity and interest that it makes sense to do that.
yeah, I couldn't agree more.
But
Well, Rob,
very interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. I just want to say I appreciate your insights.
Oh, it's fun.
Kind of giving us the business side of things. You know, with the price point of the drone, technically speaking, it would take 2 or 3x the amount of time to make up the cost of that drone. And I would argue even further, because when these smaller drones, you just can't articulate them in the same way as an Inspire.
Yeah.
And so that really reduces the quality and the proximity of the footage that you can acquire for a given client. And so I would actually argue that this drone would take a significantly longer amount of time to make up the cost of the aircraft.
Well, before we go, that's actually really interesting. So how much is the X7?
The camera, I think the camera is like 2,800, I want to say.
And how much is an Inspire 2?
Well, so you can get the X7 16 millimeter lens Inspire 2 for like $7,200 now. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Can you get it new?
You also have dual batteries. So in the case of an emergency, you have redundancy, you know?
Wow, that's something to think about.
Yeah, it sure
It is more money, but man, it seems like you're getting quite a bit more drone.
Yeah, for sure.
Not the dual cameras, I guess, but...
well, it technically has two. The FPV camera.
That's true.
So...
That's true. Yeah, anyways, lots to think about.
Yeah, we're definitely hesitant ourselves, but really curious what you guys think, and let us know in the comments, or go to Ask Drone U, ask a question, and give us also your opinion. We would love to put it on the show. But thanks again for joining us. My name is Paul.
I'm Rob.
This is Ask Drone U.